It's time for another round of
Pat GPT.
Pat GPT is brought to you by FOMO Sapiens, the podcast for entrepreneurial thinkers. It's the show where I, Patrick J. McGinnis, share some of my own entrepreneurial thinking in the form of inspiration, practical ideas, and knowledge that you can use at work and in your daily life. Today's topic is some thoughts on mindset. All right, Pat GPT, start generating. Now, why did I choose today to talk about mindset? Well, one thing is, if you didn't listen, we just had recently on the show, if you haven't heard it, go back and listen, a wonderful guest called Payam Zamani, who talks about his journey from Iran, where he was part of an oppressed religious minority, the Baha'i people, to the United States, where he became an instant success. Well, I mean, not instant, it was a lot of work, but then they went public, became a huge company, then it was part of the tech bubble, it crashed again, he's had to rebuild it. So really amazing story. And he's a ray of sunshine, Payam. I mean, it is. You listen to the guy, he's just, everything he puts out into the world is so great. And so anyway, really good story. And it made me think about the power of mindset, because I've been thinking a lot about a mindset. As you all know, I've started a company recently, a coaching company, executive coaching, working with leaders or founders of companies on how to achieve their objectives in a sustainable way. And the more I think about it, it's like my big takeaway is that the greatest barriers to achieving our objectives are the barriers we place on ourselves. This is why I'm doing this, because as somebody who at some times felt limitless and I could do everything and I just kind of knew what I had to do to succeed, and at other times felt like I couldn't do anything right, a lot of that, the vast majority of that happened inside of my head. And it still happens now, by the way. It's not like every day I wake up, feel like I'm going to conquer the world. I have days where I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting it all wrong. And so the more that I think about this, the fact that it's an internal conversation, it's really about mindset. And in fact, the coaching company, the motto or the sort of slogan that I came up with, and I'm going to take credit for this. I do have co-founders, but I'm taking credit for this one. This is my baby, is greatness lies where mindset meets skill set. Or actually, it's greatness lies where skill set means mindset. And why is that? Well, Mittal, who's one of my co-founders, always talks about the fact that skill set's not enough. You need to have the right mindset. And I do think about that, because it's the mindset that unlocks the skill set, right? You can be the best, bottle washer in your town, but if your head's not in the game, you're not going to succeed. So that's what I want to talk about today. I would say 4 things to say about what are the barriers to successfully navigating the mindset stuff. There's more than 4, but 4 biggies, and we'll talk about those right after the break.
FOMO.
As I said, greatness lies where skill set means mindset. I think that's pretty sweet. I like that. I feel good about that. If you head over to xquotient.io, you can see that on the page in red, beautiful red letters. What are the 4 kind of big things that I think about when it comes to mindset and getting your mindset right? Like, why do we struggle? And why does that happen? Well, the first one is what I call the 2 T's, trauma. Great example. Somebody who's been on this podcast was telling me that they had a business mistake the company made. They were building a new facility and they totally messed it up. And after that, it was so difficult and painful. He had PTSD, post-traumatic stress, around this thing. And it was holding him back. And he needed to do the work of moving from there to a post-traumatic growth place, right? The idea is like something bad happens, you either are permanently damaged, go back to normal, or actually come out ahead. And so that was his work, but he had all this trauma. Trauma is a word people throw around a lot. Oh, I'm traumatized, or I'm dealing with intergenerational trauma. I'm not dismissing that. I'm just saying it's a word that's like very thrown around, and I'm throwing around today. But my point is that when something bad happens, it is very tempting and more than tempting. It's sort of like likely for many people that you're just going to dwell on that, and it's going to be something that you fear happening again next time around. So working through the trauma, addressing it, identifying it, targeting it, that's a biggie. The second T is trust. Because if something bad happens, there's probably people that are involved in this thing as well. And so then there can be a lack of trust and faith in people. And I've seen this, like working with some clients I have who are amazing people, by the way. I love working with them. I've seen where some folks, it's just like a real thing that they need to focus on. It's very common, actually. When you're building relationships and, things always move around in different directions. You can never predict what's going to happen. People will let you down. You will let people down. And so kind of learning how to operate when you have to deal with real people and figuring out who to trust and who not to trust, and when it's appropriate to trust and when it's unproductive to trust, and when your lack of trust is holding you back because, it's causing you to spend more time thinking about things than you should do, like all this sort of stuff. It's very important to leadership. And so trust is another big thing, and lack of trust. And it can be really hard to get over that. It requires work because you may not be able to trust people, but you still got to get to a place where you can move forward and not distrust in, sort of reflexively everything they do. So those are the two T's, trauma and trust. 3, rumination. Rumination, the idea that we tell ourselves a story that's really terrible. I do this thing, catastrophizing. We've talked about this on the show before. Talked about this with Maura Aarons-Mealy, the anxious achiever, which is the idea that, it's like, oh, I was negotiating a contract. The contract falls apart. And then in my head, I'm like, oh my God, what's going to happen next? I'll probably get hit by a car. And then I'm going to end up not being able to work, and I'll be living on the street within 6 months. Like, I do that all the time. I go from something bad happened to I am homeless. I don't know why I do that. I mean, I work on it, but that's rumination. It's like telling yourself a story that isn't productive and like really isn't real. Because if I lost my job, I just move in with one of you guys. So we'd be fine. That's a biggie. And that is also self-talk. It's inside your head. It's a mindset thing. Like all of these things are mindset things. If you decide and work at this thing, if you decide to address it, you can do. Finally, 4th one, myopia. So what's crazy is very talented people, after doing the same thing for a long time, they have tunnel vision. It's like they don't see beyond their little lane. And we talked about this. We've been talking about this as the theme of the season, about creativity, the power of creativity. To be creative, you can't just stay in your little silo, right? And so myopia, a lack of ability to see beyond what's right in front of you, that's a mindset thing. Because you decide, and we're going to talk about this in a future Pat GPT, how to do some of this stuff, how to avoid myopia. But you have to decide, make it part of your worldview, that there is value in that being curious and pushing yourself in new directions and not simply just focusing on the same old thing, that has a power that you want to have. I think it's a massive superpower just in terms of being a person who's interesting and that enjoys the world around them. But more than that, it really is a mindset thing. So those are my 4 big things to think about: trauma, trust, rumination, and myopia. If you have thoughts, ideas, reach out. You can find me at letsconnect@patrickmcginnis.com, on Instagram at Patrick J. McGinnis, LinkedIn, I love LinkedIn, and of course, Twitter, PJ McGinnis. All right, we'll be back on Thursday with another episode of FOMO Sapiens. Until then, take care of yourselves, FOMO Sapiens, and Pat GPT, stop generating.
FOMO.
FOMO Sapiens is recorded in New York City. Theme music is by Mike McGinnis, and editing and post-production is by Josh Elstro. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me at FOMOSapiens.com and at PatrickMcGinnis.com. To advertise on FOMO Sapiens, reach out to contact@FOMOSapiens.com.